There you go. All right, so last night, I think it was last night, I put up a scheduling assignment. If you haven't seen that yet, it's up now. So there's that. Later today, there will be a quiz going up. It'll cover what we've talked about in week 1. So I'll probably be a week behind on all my quizzes. So this week we'll be quizzing you over week 1 material. Next week we over quiz week 2 material and so on. Also, I am going to talk about trees today primarily and kind of the concept of why. Answer a few questions as well. There will be another follow-up video to this where I go in a little bit more detail on 2 of the other algorithms. They take a little bit more time and effort to explain. And so I'm going to go through them a little bit slower and do a couple other things I hope that you'll find interesting with them. That said, but today's we're just going to talk more about what a tree is, how we go about it, and then what they're used for, and then we'll go from there into one of the algorithms and kind of go see what's up. Any questions that you want to see before we get going though? Anybody? Anyone? No? All righty. Well, speak up if you do. We'll go this route first, I guess. So trees look like this, and I don't mean the trees that are outside. I mean, oh darn it, go away. No one likes you. There you go, much better. When we have a set of points in a graph like so, doesn't really matter to what you call them. Just put some numbers on or some letters on so we can tell who's who. And so we're going to make a weighted graph here. It will not be a complete graph. And I am not drunk, but it does look like I am when I draw a picture like this. I'll make it so it jumps over that guy there. And nice, and one of those dudes. And let's put some weights on here. Not sure what I'm weighting it by. I don't really care. Just some random weights. Could be time, could be distance, could be something. Apparently it's not distance. And 7. Sweet. Now, if you were to connect these things together, okay, and you wanted to connect them, you didn't want to make a circuit, you just wanted to connect them. Why on earth would I want to connect them? No, good question. Water pipe, sewer, the other kind of water. Let's see here, electrical, trains, etc., etc., etc. Okay, the idea with these things is you don't need a circuit. Well, people say you don't need a circuit for electrical, but let's be honest, you run one wire, it's got 2 strands in it, you go in there and back, or you run a couple of wires, but you run them there and back on the same pole. So in essence, it's just one thing. You don't need to make a full loop on back around. One could argue that if one lived at this end of town, one could just walk down the street to the other end of the town, obviously get your shopping done if it was all on one long main drag, and walk back. The idea here is that clearly you need to get back to where you started from, okay? And these other situations here, we just need to connect every house back to the sewer plant. We need to connect every house back to the water, wherever the water is coming from or whatever it is. These are a big deal. Obviously, though, several things come into play. So you could talk about total distance, obviously, it could be weights. And frequently it is. Other times it's going to be just straight up cost. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, I guess, in a few minutes. We'll talk some more about that. Cost, what do you mean? So tunnels, if you're building a railway, tunnels, just actual linear cost. So it may cost a lot more to dig a tunnel. So you want to go like 50 miles out of your way to avoid having to make a tunnel. You'll save a bunch up front. Will it save a ton over the long haul? Maybe, maybe not. You burn more fuel. So there's obviously economic concerns in there. Litigation is a huge one. Like, we'd like to run this power line or this sewer pipe or whatever across here. Well, good luck with that, because you're going to fill out your your environmental impact statements and all this, and then you're going to get sued and da 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 da. Versus if you'd have just gone this route, you'd probably been better off all along. You're going to spend more in pipe and more in everything else, maybe, but in the long run, you're probably further ahead. So there's other costs there. In fact, this might be $11 million or something, okay, or billion or whatever the new cost is for who knows what anymore. When I used to live up in Idaho, I taught up there for a few years. I'll never forget this railroad that they'd built back in, I don't even remember when they built it, in the early 1900s maybe. And the thing is crazy because in about the span of 20, not even 20 miles up this canyon, there is what is there, like 11 tunnels and 87 what do you call it, spans where you with wooden trestles and stuff. It's ridiculous. Anyway, you can read all about it. Anyway, then they also built this one across this giant canyon, and it's just crazy. But the idea is that's the only way to get up the hill. And you can see the elevation goes from 800 feet to 3,400 feet. And it's not even that big of a difference, like 67 miles. Yeah. Most of the climb happens, however, in the first, because by the time you get to this nut rag or whatever there, that you've done most of the climbing and you've only gone 20 miles. And so it's pretty crazy. Once you get up on top, it's fairly flat across the top. And it just switch back, switch back, switch back, switch back, switch back, switch back. And it was really hard to do. And so, yeah, 1 5-mile stretch, there's a dozen trestles. Yeah, exactly. And I forget how many, but anyway, it's crazy. And, finally it went out of business because, they couldn't keep it up anymore and they didn't really have any use for it anymore. So there was really no other way to get there. There was another train that went, probably 50 miles up the canyon, and then it went up this other gorge but it was just climb. There wasn't any back and forth and whatnot. It was a pretty narrow climb. It wasn't that bad. So that if you did run the train that way, you would be out all kinds of more money in fuel costs probably over the years, and it would probably take more time. And yet they probably could have built that one in half the time. And just because of that fact that it wasn't nearly as hard to build. So when you think about these things, keep in mind that it isn't always time. It isn't always distance or time. It's obviously, we get stuck thinking about time and distance, but it isn't always that. So if you wanted to say, let's just pick one here. Let's just say this is the water station here, the water pumping station or whatever. Everything else has to get connected back to this. And so we clearly don't need to run, for instance, pipes from whatever this is, G to F to D, or from G to D. One or the other would get the job done. In fact, you don't even have to connect G to F or G to D because, eventually everybody could have followed back through a certain different route, okay? The idea here, of course, would be to take the minimum idea to connect them all. And what that's called is called the minimum spanning tree. And the idea behind it is we need to connect them all. So we're going to connect all vertices This is very important. No circuits allowed. Okay, and we need to do it with the minimum sum of weights. So cheapest is another way of thinking of it. It's the cheapest, it's the smallest one, whatever makes you happiest. Now we're going to learn Kruskal's algorithm. It is the easiest to explain. That's why I do it on video. If it sounds a lot like the cheapest link algorithm, that's because it basically is. You are going to select the shortest, or if you prefer, cheapest edge, and then the next, and so on, until you have a tree. Spanning, I should say, spanning tree. Okay, again, a spanning tree connects all of them. Okay, minimum does it for the minimum sum of the weights. Okay, So if you come up here, I'm going to use my highlighter. I think is probably going to be the easiest to demonstrate this with. So pink sounds nice. Oh boy. So the minimum one that I have on here is this link here. So I'm going to use this one. Probably not shocked by that. As soon as I saw the 5, I was probably like, yeah, okay, I'll probably use that guy. Cool. 6, yeah, we'll probably use that one too. That's cool. 7, nice. All right. Now what's the next one here? 10. I'd buy that. Sure. The next shortest one is 12, and you're like, should I use that? Well, here's my question to you. I'm sorry, it's 11. And the question is, should I use it? Yeah, I should use 11 for sure. The next one is 12. Now, if you think about this now, I have to somehow connect, because I've got this bottom right here, I've got this piece of the graph, it's a subgraph. And I've got this subgraph, right? And I need to connect those two subgraphs together somehow, okay? So the question is, how am I going to do it? Well, if I connect it from here to here, boom, graph solved, okay? And that would be our minimum spanning tree, okay? That's how the game gets played. It's pretty straightforward. Again, it's not a hard concept. The concept is why are we using this versus why do we need a circuit versus why do we whatever it is, okay? Clearly, this is going to be a big deal right here, okay? Infrastructure-wise, what goes there? Probably some big branch station. So when you're planning one of these deals, you're like, this is probably going to be this big junction box here or something. You're probably going to make sure that you can buy some property near there where you can have this kind of situation. Maybe that's a place where you have an extra pump station or something. What do you call those? A booster pump, something like that, where everything kind of comes together and then you go off from there. So obviously, some of these things are going to be more obvious than others. When you look at them, you're like, okay, these are the obvious ones. This one here is probably a really obvious if you looked at it on a map. Obviously, I didn't draw a map up, but if you look at this on a map, that 5 could be good because it's pretty much a straight shot across, farmland or something, and all you gotta do is dig up some nice clean dirt and whatnot. This one here, 37, man, that's probably because you have to dig through people's houses and power line, just what a god awful mess that would be to mess with. If I was digging pipeline, man, I want to be out in the country somewhere where I can just dig to my heart's content. I would not want to be in town where some clown digs up somebody's pipe and then we got to fix that, and it's just a mess. So all these other problems, of course, it's going to take longer. They just finished paving the street outside of our house. It only took a year to do 1.5 miles. They put in some new sewer pipe, and then they repaved the road, and they widened it a skosh. And it took almost exactly a year. Crazy. But if you think about it, putting the actual pavement down, they could have done it easily under, they did one lane one day and one lane the next day. And they spray painted it the next day with paint. So maybe less than a week to actually do the paving aspect of it. They dinked around a lot, but why? Because when you dig in these big culverts, these big water pipes in and whatnot, you have to dig around everything else. You've got to slow traffic down, jump through a ton of hoops. So if they were bidding this project, he's like, it's 1.5 miles. All right, we'll just bid it for this. Geez, oh dear, they spent almost a year doing the thing. So they really have to bid that thing up cost-wise. And again, it's not because of the distance. They could have probably paved 60 miles of road probably for what they bid this cost at. It's the other stuff that they had to do that took forever on it, okay? So just some things to think about that. What I'm going to probably do so there's some assignments in the book, obviously, about this. A question I might ask you on a test would be to give you we could talk about things like, here's an aerial view of the city or a small part of the small town or something like that, and you could talk about that. In that situation, if you were just going to put in new sewer lines in a small town or something, they're probably all weighted the same. And since they're all weighted the same, in terms of distance in the city, because you're digging up city roads, and so it would come down to distance at that point. Okay, if you're in a small town America, it's probably not as bad as if you're in a big city, because there's probably more junk buried and there's more stuff to do and there's more regulations and everything else. So, but in this small town, pretty much any road in this small town is going to have the same kind of thing. So it really then would boil down to just a distance consideration, versus if you had to put pipeline from here, to Astoria, and you're going to run it along Highway 30 or something. Well, then there's going to be parts of that that's going to be just easy money. You can go 8 miles, 15, 20 miles a day probably. And there's other parts where you can be just an awful slog because of going through the city or going through whatever it happens to be, lowland area, what have you. So just be aware of that. As far as doing the math on these, there's not very difficult. It would be 16, 27, 39, 55, I think would be our total cost. Okay, so what is 55 miles? What is that? $55 million. I don't know what it is. 55 days to do the job. Well, I don't know because it doesn't matter. I'm just going by the weights. At this point, we're assumed that all of the weights are in the same unit of measurement. So if they're in millions of dollars, they're all in millions of dollars. If it's in hours, it's all in hours. And we'll just go from that standpoint there. Okay. Question on the general gist of that guy at all? The other two algorithms I'm going to go over in the video that I'm going to add along are the Kruskal's algorithm, Dijkstra's algorithm, and which I think some of you have heard, especially software people. And then, come on, Jay, pull your head out of your fanny. The other one, dummy. Prim's algorithm, yeah. So I'm going to run through both of those and give examples of those. Those are, well, I'm going to run through them. I'm going to slog through them slowly because they take a lot more time to explain, I think. Once you get them, it's pretty straightforward, but Kruskal's, it's pretty easy money here, okay? Again, note the difference between these. On a test, I would ask you for probably examples of when I would want a tree versus when I would want a circuit versus when I would want I say a Hamiltonian circuit versus an Euler circuit. And pretty much circuits is all I'm going to talk about when it comes to circuits, paths, and that sort of thing, because circuits is what it's all about. So, like Hamiltonian circuits, we talked a little bit about those. Hamiltonian, you're going from place to place. Right? You don't use every edge necessarily. Versus Euler, every edge is used. That's the big difference. Okay, clearly you have to go to every vertex, but every edge is used. And so, this is, think about, this is about the journey. So again, we talked, I think last week about street sweepers, the people that have to go up and down every single street, the garbage man, things like that, have to go up and down every street. And again, both under the heading of circuits, because you got to get back to where you started from, back to the garbage place, back to, wherever your street sweeper lives, whatever. Versus a Hamiltonian circuit, I'm out running errands, buying groceries, that sort of thing. Okay. But again, just like we talked about with circuits, doesn't matter on an Euler. I just need to get back home because it's all about the roads. And so the roads might be 80 miles long in town. I'm going to go over all 80 miles of road. That's my job, is to clean them all. Okay. Versus I'm running errands. I really want to minimize the distance I travel when at all possible. But again, there's more to it than that. Oftentimes there's a time constraint. There's oftentimes this has to get done before that. So there's some scheduling pieces to it as well, of course. That's also true when it comes to things like Kruskal's algorithm. So not Kruskal algorithm, but trees in general. When you have a tree, if it was just as easy as connecting all of the small pieces together, like, oh, let's just connect all the shorter ones together, it'd be great. Then you would be a piece of cake and it would be wonderful and all. But oftentimes it comes down to, like, for instance, as you know, a political decision. Why did they go through this town versus that town? Why did this one get the railroad and that one didn't get the railroad? Whatever it happens to be. Just kind of always interesting to note that when I was a kid out in the sticks, there were some small towns there out there. And when I was a kid, our town was about 2,500 people. Now it's smaller. I lived outside of it. But there were all these other little towns and burgs out and around. And some of them are just basically ghost towns. There's nothing, well, not even a ghost anymore. Like there's like 2 houses left there or something. Matter of fact, I grew up in Huntsville, Washington, right? Population 22 or something. I don't know, whatever it is. There used to be a thriving town. When I was a kid, there was still a little mini grocery store and post office there. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, that quit. They closed the post office. And my dad went to high school, went to grade school there and whatever. And if you go back in time, but then why did it fizzle up and dry up? Why did the other towns on either side of it, like 6 miles or 3 miles one way, 9 miles the other way, why did they continue to hang on? you know, why did a certain town grow bigger and a certain one didn't? Well, part of it had to do with, you know, obviously, can you get the raw materials in? And then obviously some places it had to do with obviously where you happen to have been located, you know, in terms of this is a good trading route. You've got some stuff here you can deal with. Walla Walla turned into a fairly good sized town. It's a very good agricultural area. That's great, but other towns didn't do as well. They didn't get as big. But oftentimes there's one town that's called Turner Marengo. It was actually threatened to be one of the bigger towns in Columbia County back in the day. And then Columbia County, Washington, and then it dried up and there's nothing there anymore. And that's because back in the day, the railroad didn't end up going through there. And it ended up going through the other one instead. And so that's kind of why that one just kind of faded away. And yet back in I want to say the late 1800s, it was like bigger than the Dayton, the one that I grew up in. I went to high school and stuff. And just different things happened. And why did it go that way versus this way? It would have been a straighter shot to go that way. Although I would argue that I wouldn't want to build the railroad because you had to go up and over a couple of big canyons going that way. So I'm not sure I would have wanted to build it that way. But it probably came down to a political decision. Frequently those things do. And so, you know, it could have been somebody made some decision back in the day and everybody now is still living with the costs or benefits or whatever of it. So it's not always as easy as crunching numbers, because if it was, life would be a lot easier. Wow, would life be a lot easier? If life was just pure math. I don't know if I'd like it better, but it would sure be a lot easier. I'll put it that way. 6. Oh, I don't know. 27. Yeah, that'll play. So another Kruskals, just for fun here. And I guess we'll take him. And this one. Nice. 6. Cool. 7. No, not so fast. Because what have you done? You've created yourself a circuit by doing that. And we do not want that. Okay. 8. We can take 8. That's faux show. Nice. 9. Beautiful. Nice. What we got now? 9. There's no 10s. 11s. This 11 here, no bueno. Don't need that. Creates a circuit for us. This 11, very much so. Nice. Oh, crap. Now I see it. As soon as I get there, I see it now. You're all been screaming at the computer. I'm sorry. Sorry, man. We'll make it bigger than 11 so no one has to like say that I have screwed up. 17. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Okay. I'm going to pick the shortest route between either C and E, D and E, or F and E. And so in this case, it sure looks like the shortest route must be just 12, huh? Okay. And now everybody is connected. Nice. Oh, bus lines is another bus lines. Bus lines are another example of this. Trees. So are airplane routes as well. When you're looking at where some usefulnesses of trees. It could be a situation where several buses come out of this terminal right here, whether that's in Beaverton, if you will. There's like a transit center or something like that. It's kind of crazy ever since they started, the stimulus, whatever package, whatever many years ago that was. There used to be this little bus that ran around out here and hauled old people around. And now we have a full bus line that you can get a ride to Portland, and it carries you out. I don't think it goes all the way to Astoria, but you got to Rainier, and then there's a little transit station there, and then you can get on a bus that takes you over to Longview, or you take another bus that takes you to Astoria and stuff. And the idea is, you're connected. You could take a bus from Wilsonville or something into downtown Portland and jump on another bus to get out to here, and take another bus and jump off to there. Point is, everybody's connected that way. Okay. To get to the E down here, well, if you were at F, you're like, oh, it's so close to go here. Yeah, the train doesn't go that way, pal. You got to go all the way up here and then back down and around. Because remember, it's not about the shortest distance for you. If the shortest distance for you is 16, start walking. That's great. But the shortest distance on a bus, train, what have you, would be to come up to here and then up and down and around the corner to it. Okay. Again, we're looking at this as not the shortest distance for a person or a line. We're talking about the shortest total distance is what we're actually after. So this would be a nice minimum spanning tree, the way this one has been laid out there. Okay. Again, don't get hung up on the 7 here or this 11, because again, if you connected those guys back in, creates a circuit, and we certainly don't need that. If you think about this, I could at this point do this, this, that, 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 and you'd have this nice spanning tree. And isn't that beautiful? It is beautiful. Something to think about, though, is if this was your power line and the power line broke right here, that would suck to be you if you were on the downhill side of that. Okay, so things to think about when you're doing spanning trees, or and you're doing a situation like this, is that redundancy is not a bad thing always, right? So we like redundancy whenever possible. And so the minimum spanning tree says, hey, there it is. But if anything washes out, breaks, whatever, the whole thing goes to pot, okay? And so you got a problem at that point. So something that always reminds me of this, we lived out in the sticks when I was a kid. Well, whenever I got married too, I lived out in the sticks for a while. And I was coming home one day, and the wife was parked in the road about half a mile from our house, and I drove up there, and this tree had blown down. Well, there's really no way to get around it. There's one way to get to my house. We lived up this canyon. So I hoofed it back to the house, got my chainsaw, hoofed it back down the road with my chainsaw, cut it up, threw it off the road. It's not like in the city. You're like, oh, well, 2nd Street's blocked. I'll go over 1 street and go around. All right, I'm home. Redundancy is a beautiful thing, and it's very nice when that can happen. So, for instance, electrically, in town here, you might have someone crash into a pole. The lights might flicker and go down for a second, but we're able to kind of renew the circuitry is able to keep up with most of the town with some redundancies. So the minimum spanning tree is a wonderful thing, but understand it has its limitations as well, because if anything, one part of this goes down, the whole thing kind of goes to pot on us. Okay, so just be aware of that. Some things to think about. So for planning purposes, obviously, these kind of things get used a ton. You as the project manager, as far as laying things out, like, hey, this is the shortest, and then some lawyer gets a hold of it and goes, yeah, this one's going to cost 20 times as much. All you did was look at the distance. You didn't look at the the amount of property we're going to have to purchase, or the amount of time we have to fight this in court, and so on and so on and so on. And so as a result, you might have to go back to the drawing board and then look at some different weighting calculations for that. Okay. So the whole point of trees really is just to get down to where I have a connection. There's no circuits. The only difference between the 3 algorithms I'm going to show you really is just how they go about it. Kruskals, it's pretty nice, pretty easy. The other 2 are kind of written a lot more in the computer. They're written a lot more for computer systems to do. And that's why most of you have heard of them, because you've seen them in a software version of things before. So if you've heard of them, that's where you've heard of them, I should say. Those 2 had not ones I'd ever been around a ton until I started teaching classes like this. I don't know, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And someone, as always, a software person goes, oh, yeah, it's like Dijkstra. I'm like, oh, what? You've heard of that? Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And I think the reason that you guys see that from that standpoint is because that's a nice application of it. And it's a nice application. That's one that has the most application, let's say, in a software scenario. And so there you go. Clearly, networks, anytime you're dealing with a network in terms of social networking as well, same kind of thing can apply. Who do you know? Your 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon right here. Where are you? Or where is this other actor? Where's the relationship to him? They can connect them via a bunch of different things. Several of them were acted in this one movie here, that kind of a thing as well. So if you've seen those kind of things, similar process, although it doesn't really have any impact on my daily life. Okay. Yeah. Questions on the gist of that? It's not a very hard concept for sure. It's one of the easier ones. It makes probability look like, well, nothing. Well, I'm sorry, probability makes this look like nothing. Yeah, get that right, Jay. Yeah. Questions, comments? Everyone's really quiet today. I feel like I'm talking to myself. No comments, no questions. Interesting. Probability wise, so how do we feel about probability at this point? You guys have any questions about the probability stuff we've been doing?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. The ones that I think that are the hardest, but also the easiest to do in probability, and I think once you understand them and you can't screw them up too bad, is the concept of combinations and then where they're used. We use these ones all the time. So if you have three things, I don't know, Jay, George, and Kathy or something. And if there's three of them, there's four things that you can do. There are four things you can do. Oh, don't shut off, computer, don't shut off. Do with three things. Okay, so you could choose 0 of them. You could choose 1 of them. You could choose 2 of them. And you could choose all 3 of them. All right, and so I'm going to go through this a little bit, but I want to make sure this is really clear in your heads because combinations is the most important of the two. Permutations is pretty good, but we don't, in our daily lives, we use combinations a lot more. So the game is this. If there's 3 of them and I choose 0 of them, there's one way I can do that. Okay. If I choose them one at a time, I can take Jay or George or Kathy. There's 3 ways to do that. If I choose 2 at a time, I can take these 2 or those 2 or these 2. There's 3 ways to do that. If I choose all 3 of them, there's one way to do that. That's a total of 8 ways. Wait a minute now. I could take you or leave you. There's 3 items, and I come up with 8. Wait a minute. That's 2 to the 8th power, or 2 to the 3rd power. That's right. Wow, that's exactly right. So this is actually a binomial sort of thing. And so a couple of years ago, this lady showed me this, and well, she didn't show it to me. She was doing it because for years when I taught this class, I've taught people who are not engineers, probability that is. And so when I start this thing, I say, all right, get some pens on your desk or something. All right, take the red pen, the purple pen, or the blue pen or whatever. And you move them around your desk. And I think it's kind of helpful to sell the bit. But this one lady, I was watching her over her shoulder, and it's kind of like, what in the think is she doing? I mean, I know what she's doing, but I don't really know why oops, dumbass. I know what she's doing. I don't know why she's doing it. It's kind of weirded me out, to be quite honest with you. Well, I should do that over. Wow. And I know what she's doing. I don't get why she's doing it. And then she says to me, well, check it out. There's 8 outcomes. I'm like, well, yeah, duh. And then she's like, but think about it. She's like, when you look at this, I did not take this one, and I did not take this one, and I did not take this one. There's one way that I could take none of them. I went, that's pretty cool. And she goes, look, I took the end one, I took the middle one, I took the first one. She's like, there's 3 ways to take them one at a time. I'm like, oh, that's pretty slick. And she goes, I can take this one, those 2, or those 2. There's 3 ways to choose 2. And there's one way that you could choose all 3 of them. And I'm like, what? That is crazy. So then I do, well, I got to try this myself. So I'm like, all right, let's count to 16. Well, count to 15 rather. For those of you who are not great binary people, that's all we're doing is counting by 2s, right? Okay, that's 7. Here's, come on, Jay, pull your head out. Yeah, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes, right? No, 1, 2, 4, 8, yes, here's 8, duh. And then here's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, okay? And so when you look at this, hey, 4, choose 0, there's one way to do that, it's right here. 4, choose 1 at a time, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. 4, choose 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And 4, choose 3 is 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And 4, choose all 4 is 1. If you add those up, that's 10, 14, 16, which is 2 to the 4th power. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's mind-blowing. That's so cool. What I want you to feel good is you understand where it comes from. So the formula, of course, is n choose x. Your book uses, of course, n choose x like this, which I hate, but whatever. It's just n factorial over n minus x times x factorial. If one was doing it by hand, which I don't really care if you do it by hand, but I need you to understand this concept. So what we're going to get to is the idea of taking some stuff out of a bowl. So in this bowl, I'm going to have some M&Ms. Bear in mind that I'll probably end up calling them Skittles here in a minute, and I'll probably end up calling them marbles, because they're little round things. I can't tell them apart except for if I have my eyes open. If I got my eyes open, I can't tell what they are. Oh yeah, I can totally tell it's a blue one by feel. No, you can't, you weirdo. Okay. Yeah, it'll play. All right, so I have 4 colors of marbles in here, and so I'm going to reach in and select some. So I'm going to select 3 marbles. How many ways can I do it? Okay, so there are a total of 8, 12, 16, 22 total marbles. 22, choose 3 is how many ways I can pull that off. So in this calculator, it is math. So second math is number 5, 7, 22, comma 3. There's 1,540 ways to pull that off. Okay, that'll be my denominator. Okay, so the questions will be things like this. What's the probability that I get 2 blue and 1 red? What are you doing? 2 blue and 1 red. Well, I don't know, but I do know that there's 1,540 possible ways to do that. Okay, to pick 3 different marbles. Now, first thing that occurs to me is there aren't very many blues and aren't very many reds. I mean, there's more blues than there are reds and greens, of course. But it's weird that I'm not going to get a black marble. And the fact that in my mind it registers that it's weird means it's probably not going to be a very high probability of happening. So the way that I like to do this is I like to actually start off with 22, choose 3 in the denominator. And there are 8 black ones, of which I want none of them. There are 4 greens, I don't want any of them. There's 4 reds, I want 1 of them. There's 6 blues, and I want 2 of them. And the reason I do that is because I'd like to screw up as few times as I possibly can. And Lord knows I don't need any help screwing things up, okay? So if you count the numbers on the left on top, they add up to 22, which is the numbers on the left on the bottom. If you count the numbers on the right on top, they add up to the numbers on the right on the bottom, which makes me happy. It's still possible to screw it up, but it seems like it's a lot less likely. 8, choose 0, 1 way to do that. 4, choose 0, 1 way to do that. 4, choose 1, 1 way to do that. 6, choose 2, come on, top of your head, Jay, is 15 ways to do that out of 1,540. And so it'd be 60 out of 1,540, or if you prefer, 6 over 154. This is all fine and good, or you can just give me a decimal. About a 3.9% chance. Okay, I'm good either way with those. Okay, I want you to feel comfortable with that. We'll be doing several of those in your assignments. I think it'll be fairly straightforward though when you see them. I think the combinations and permutations is pretty well spelled out. I think the combination one and actually using it is probably the hardest part for some people. You think, a lot of people do think, well, I got to do blue. Well, there's 6 blues out of 22 marbles. And then there's 5 blues out of 21 marbles. And then there's 4 reds out of 20 marbles. Yeah. You're not wrong, except you specified the way you did it there. You specified that it was blue, blue, then red. That's not how I said. I just said when I reach in and grab 3 marbles, I want to end up with 2 blues and a red. And as well you well know, it doesn't matter if you're playing regular poker. It doesn't matter what order they ended up in your hand. The first thing you do when you pick them up anyways is you change the order in your hand anyways. You put the spades by the spades and the hearts and the hearts and so on and so on. You change the orders anyway, so it doesn't matter, okay? So when you look at this does not equal 3.9%. In fact, it's quite a bit less than that. Let me go ahead and punch that out. 30 times 4 is that divided by 22 times 21 times 20 is, geez, look at that. It's about 13%. It's as if it's 1/3. It's as if it's 1/3 of it. Well, why is that? Because you specified blue, blue, red. But that isn't what I specified. I said basically in any order. So it could have gone blue, red, blue. Or it could have gone red, blue, blue. Okay. Now think about that. When you look at this, this one's still going to be 6 out of 22. But this would be 4 out of 21. This would be 5 out of 20. And this one would be 4 out of 22, 6 out of 21, 5 out of 20. But when you do the math, the bottom is the exact same number, 22 times 21 times 20. And the numerator is still going to be 6 times 4 times 5. So the answer will be 0.129 or whatever, 0.129, 0.129, whatever. When you add them up, you get the 0.3, no, oh, there's a 0 in there, isn't there? Sorry. So you get 0.039 or whatever we had a minute ago when you add them up. That's exactly the idea of what's going to happen here, okay? And the reason for that is because there are 3 marbles that we chose, and we chose 2 of them to be blue, and 3 choose 2 is 3. So we found this one probability, we could have just multiplied it by 3 right off the bat. And so that is the purpose of using, up here, using combinations instead, because combinations already take that into account. They don't worry about all the different possibilities. They just say, listen, we just want to end up with this thing when we're finished. We don't care what order it landed on our plate or in our hand or whatever it is. We don't care about order. Order is not important to us, okay? I would argue probably it's more like 75-25 that you'll, in your normal daily math lives, will be using combinations versus permutations. We don't do a ton of permutations because a lot of things in our daily lives, order is not that important to us, okay? If you were betting on people finishing a race, this one always makes me laugh. Where'd it go? Zoom, am I on Zoom? Am I on Zoom? Where am I at? Oh, there I am, sorry. Here I am, share screen. There you go, dummy. Come on, there you go. In a race, and I mean any race, the whole point of a race is order matters. Okay, the whole point of any race is always order matters. Okay, and so if there were 40 cars in a race, but I don't know about cars, Jay, it doesn't matter. There's 40 cars in a race. How many ways, how many different ways can the top 5 finish? I don't know. But I do know it's order matters. So it's going to be a permutation. So 40p5. Okay. And if you do that on your calculator, let's do it in Excel this time, shall we? What are you doing? Excel, there we go. Excel or Google Sheets, whatever, this is the same for what we're doing here. So equals permute. It's permutation of 40 things taken 5 at a time. So good night, 789. Oops, what are you doing, stupid? 60960. What are you doing? 60960. Good Lord, there's 78 million ways for the top 5 people to finish. Here's my question to you. Are they all equally likely to happen? If you're watching a race, okay, any race, I don't care whether it's stock cars, I don't care whether it's Indy 500, I don't care if it's the 100-meter dash. God, look at me, I'm an old man. The 100-meter dash, a marathon, it doesn't matter. People in the race, let's say there's 40 people in the race, 40 cars, 40 people, 40 horses, 40 whatever. What's the way the top 5 can finish? Are they all equally likely to happen? Yes or no? Anyone? Anyone still awake?
Probably not, I'd assume, because
Why not?
I guess skill comes in. So you have
yes. So skill, skill and driving, clearly. What else? Right, some horses are better. Some horses are better. Horses, cars are I don't know, let's say built different. All right, so you get some guys that are out there, they're racing, but they don't have a very good car, but they're racing, but they're not going to win. All right, if everybody else breaks down, they might win. Or like a range shortened race. Some people aren't very skilled. Some people are blessed, genetically speaking. So if you are, what was his name? Who's Usain Bolt? Every race he pretty much ran in, was he going to finish? He was going to finish first, or second place maybe at the latest. Right? That's it. That's all. And so they are clearly blessed, genetically speaking, from the standpoint of that guy. He was crazy fast. Other people from other countries like, well, they're in the Olympics. Okay, they're in the Olympics because they're the best in their country. But U.S. might have put forward 3 or 4, or wherever Usain was from. They put forth these great athletes. And you're like, wow, it's crazy. Well, we're never going to beat him. No, but you took 6th in the Olympics. That's pretty good. Good for you. And so just be aware of that. So what we're saying is these are the number of outcomes that are possible. We didn't say they're all equally likely to happen. Okay, there's 2 different things entirely. So if you went out and picked, say, Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, which are 2 of the better racers, and then you picked a bunch of scrubs, and those are that's going to go Kyle, Kevin, and then these scrubs are going to finish 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. I don't buy that. I don't buy that because those 3 guys, they're not going to finish in the top 5. It's not going to happen. They never finish in the top 5. So, and here's how you know this, and this is something else that when I talk about probability with people, I always stress this. In statistics as well. We talk about what are called independent events. That is, these things should happen regardless. They should happen at the same rate of things happening. Would you bet on that happening? Would you bet on this terrible driver, this guy who's never finished higher than 25th place? Would you bet he's going to win, or he's going to bet 3rd or 4th or 5th place? And you said, no. Well, why not? Because he's never done it before. Exactly. That tells you right there everything you need to know, because you've been watching, you've been keeping track. They've never finished that high. Are you going to bet on them? No. Why not? Because it's never happened. So what are you saying by your actions? You're saying that where he finishes is dependent on what he's done before. Now, things can change, obviously, right? He could get a better car this year, let's say. But based if he's driving, if nothing else changes, then do I expect this wildly different finish? I don't. And that's because it's dependent, obviously on what we've done before. What do you mean by that, Andrew? Environment can change. Like what? Like what? I'm curious what you meant by that. Cool, could be right. Sure. Oh yeah. So yeah, that actually happened one time when Danica Patrick was driving NASCAR, and I never followed her before she became I never thought she would be. I followed NASCAR. I never followed her, but she won a race in IndyCar, and everyone always bring that up. She won a range shortened race, and it was good. I mean, good for you. It ended early, and her crew chief had left her out on old tires, and then they canceled the race midway through, and they just said, okay, you're the winner. And that's cool. She won, and it counts as a W. No one's arguing that. But you look at that like, oh, there obviously is a bit of luck to some things as well, right? Or some strategy, I guess, on the part of the crew chief. Well, we're going to stay out. We're not going to pit, and we're going to hope that the rain gets shortened. These things happen. But in generally speaking, if something happens, or like a horse race too, if the one horse is good in the rain, good in the mud, you hope it rains, and then maybe that'll level the playing field for everybody else. When I used to coach football, we'd always, if you're playing a fast team, it'd be nice before turf, back in the old days when we played on grass. You'd hope that you was nice and gross and muddy. It'd slow the fast kids down, and you have a chance of beating them. So yeah, it's fun that way. So again, just be aware of that. Something else, I hit this in pretty much every class when I talk about probability, is in our daily lives, we don't really talk about what's probability. I'm going to get this hand in poker, or I'm going to do this or that. It has to do with the things that I see around me. Okay. The things that I see that are weird. You instinctively know when something has a very low probability of happening, because when it does happen, you won't shut up about it. You're like, you'll never guess what I saw today. And you never talk about that, like, honey, you'll never guess what I saw today. Well, what did you see today? Well, I said Fred Meyer. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, they had onions. Oh, okay, yeah. And you know how big they were? And they're like, you hold up like a normal sized onion. And she's like, and that's all. What? That happens every day. Or like I was on 26 today, and you'll never guess what happened. There was traffic on Highway 26 today. No, shut up. No, that happened. We don't talk about that. Now, if you got on into Highway 26 in downtown Portland at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you made it to Hillsborough in 5 or 10 minutes or whatever it takes to drive there at a normal rate of speed, in theory, with no traffic, and you drove out there and you got home, you're like, you'll never guess what happened. Yes, talk about that, because that never happens. Talk about that a lot. And so we instinctively know these things when these things happen to us. I got in trouble a few years ago at PCC. I always like to tell this story. It makes me laugh now. I was pissed at the time. I was discussing with the students the idea of independent events, especially as it relates to statistics. And so we were talking about just generic run-of-the-mill things. And so I said, for instance, if you see a car driving down the street, it's a brand new Porsche, what do you know about the guy? What do you know about the person who's driving it? And they're like, it's an old man. And everyone's like, yeah, it's an old man. I'm like, ouch, but yeah, probably. And this one lady, I'd done that for years. This one lady, she goes, it's an old white man. And I went, okay, well, I don't know about that, but whatever. Okay, fine. So then I said, all right, so what if you see a PT Cruiser? And then she shouts out, it's an old woman. And I went, oh, okay, it's weird. All right. So I was trying to go down the list of some basic, whatever. It's a truck with a ladder rack full of lumber and stuff. It's a man. He's a construction worker. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And then so down the list, I said, here's one. I said, I'll even say this about myself. I said, I used to drive one all the time when the kids were young. It was the transportation that I drove for like 8 or 10 years when the kids were young. I said, but if you had to bet, I said, but a minivan. Oh, it's a woman, she says. And I'm like, that's crazy. All right, whatever. So we go through the whole list. I get down to, I said, what about a Toyota Camry? She's like, everybody drives a Camry. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, they're all the same. I'm like, exactly. Okay, cool. So then we get all done. We make a little chart like this. And so I just go in here, give me some numbers here. So Porsches, there aren't that many Porsches. She's like, no, there's not that many Porsches. This lady's just doing all the talking. She's like, yeah. So if you see a Porsche, yeah, it's like 18 men and 2 women. I said, okay, whatever. We're just making up these numbers. All right. PT Cruiser. All right. PT Cruiser. Oh, whatever. Okay. She's like, yeah, it'd be more like this. She says it'd be more like, I don't know, whatever she said. I don't remember. Whatever. She's throwing the numbers at me. I'm just kind of like trying to keep up with her. And minivan. Oh, yeah, whatever. And there's Jay and his dad. They both drive minivans, but all right, whatever. And maybe it was 10 and 18. I don't know, whatever. And then let's pick up with a lumber rack. All right. And then she was like, oh, yeah, this is like 20 and like 1 or something. I'm like, okay, whatever. Anyways, then she goes, Camry. She's like, she was really stumped by that. She's like, then finally we agreed, okay, like 40 and 40. She's like, yeah, that'd be great. I said, so what do you notice here? And she's like, well, I said, there's a big discrepancy between men and women percentage-wise here, right? Again, it's based on this made-up data. And she's like, yeah, these people are like, yeah, everyone's all agreeing to that and whatnot. I said, well, what we call this is we say that what you drive, or what I shouldn't say you, what people drive, is dependent on gender. And she freaked out. By the way, pet peeve of mine, never tell me that my gender depends on what I drive. Okay, that's just weird. Okay. There is a dependent relationship here, but please don't say it the way it just sounds weird. Okay, here it is. So people drive dependent. She freaked out. I will drive whatever I want. And I'm like, it's not what I was saying. We're saying there's a relationship. Okay, we're not saying that you personally have to drive anything you want and don't want to drive. You can drive whatever makes you happy. Okay, it's America. Knock yourself out. What we're saying is that there are trends. Okay, now whether these are the right trends or not, I don't really care. And if you go to, like, say, Miami, the idea of Porsches might be completely different. If you looked at it age-wise, right, out here in the Northwest, only 4 people I've ever seen driving Porsches are old men who had generally have some trying to prove a point. Like, I'm rich now. Good for me. I can drive a Porsche. Good for you. And so on and so on. I said, there's a reason I drove a minivan when the kids were little, because driving a pickup with a lumber rack could not have hauled their friends, soccer balls, all the other crap you have to haul when you're hauling a bunch of kids around. The minivan is fabulous for that. Okay. Or apparently when you're an old man, my dad loves his minivan now. And he's went and bought a new one a couple of years ago. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're like in your 70s. Oh, I love this thing. It's great. Whatever. But based on age groups, different people like different things. This is the whole thing, the idea that different people or different groups of people tend to like / favor different things. Okay, this is a dependent relationship in probability and statistics. It's dependent. It's not causal. All right. It's a dependent relationship, and that is that one causes the other, or one not causes the other, but one tends to go with the other. And the idea here is this is the whole foundation for things like demographics. Okay, that's how you decide when you watch. So like for instance, whenever I listen to the radio station, there's always the same 4 or 5 basic commercials. You have erectile dysfunction. You need a divorce for dads. You need whatever it is you need. There's like 5 different commercials, always the same kind of things. Wait, it feels like they're targeting old men. Oh, well, yeah, that's right, because that's the kind of stations I listen to or something, all right? You would not hear any of those commercials on whatever the kids listen to these days. You know, I'm going to date myself, Z100 or whatever, you know. I don't even know what the kids listen to anymore. I don't really care. But I don't even listen to radio anymore. But they clearly listen to different things. The idea that if you watch Oprah, which I haven't watched her in years, but when I used to watch Oprah back in the day occasionally, I don't ever recall seeing an ad for, say, tools, an ad for, pickups, what have you. You don't see a lot of that because they know who's watching her show. People who watch her show tend to not buy that kind of stuff. Therefore, they don't put ads of that sort of thing on there. Okay. And so what finally, we had this conversation. She got all mad. And then she said, finally, I said, listen, if I said to you, I will bet you $1,000 that Porsche driving down the street has a woman in it, what would you say? She's like, she goes, yeah, I'd take that bet in a minute. I'm like, why? She's like, well, because you know it's a man. I'm like, there you go. That's all we're saying. The fact that you would put money on it tells me what you think. Okay, and that's something that I always want to leave people with in statistics, because in probability, because you know what you feel about something, whether you put money on it or not. Okay, if you feel very strongly about something, then what you're saying is that you know there's a relationship there. And even though you may or may not be able to bring yourself to say that, if you say that, listen, I would bet money on that, there's something there. Okay, right now in the world around us, we're seeing a lot of things happening. And you start talking about statistics all the time and probability. And so a lot of the conversations that people are having based on statistics, their assumption is that something should be independent or not. Okay. So for instance, talk about certain among us, there's a certain percentage of the population, a minority, whatever minority or this minority, whatever. Therefore, that same population percentage should show up in the jail population. It should show up in policing, statistics. By saying that, what you're saying is that you are assuming that everything is 100% independent. There's nothing else in there. Okay, and then so if it's not, then you're trying to describe it based on whatever it happens to be. Perhaps it's systematic racism or whatever it happens to be right now. And I'm not going to take one side or the other thing. I'm just saying this is what we're talking about. So when you hear these conversations, people are assuming, or they're having a conversation about something, you can tell what they're basing their opinion on. Okay, if you're assuming that everything should be the same, mirror what's happening in the population, that what's going on in the jails, for instance, should be the same as the population. You're saying that it's 100% independent of anything else. And so then you have to ask yourself, do you fully believe that or not? Is there some other explanation? Other people try to explain it from a different point of view, and everyone has the different things. And so I find it interesting when I watch statistics and I look at people butchering statistics frequently. They don't think about what they're saying. Okay, they don't think through and go, okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it doesn't matter about this, or the other thing. There's nothing behind this. It's strictly an independent thing, as if my name's being pulled out of a hat or something. And other people will come in from another point of view and say, well, no, it's this, and this. Well, they're saying that it's dependent on something else. So that whole philosophical debate, which I'm not going to try to get into in a class time, it comes down to your point of view on things, in terms of one person will be arguing that there's complete independence. Other person will argue there's some sort of dependence going on, because they're both trying to describe what they're seeing. Okay. What they're seeing is, here's the statistic. This is what's happening. The question is, how do we explain what those statistics are? Okay. And it's all about probability. Keep that in mind. Probability and statistics, it's more intimately related than two sides of the same coin. That sells it short, honestly, to say that. They go hand in hand. I make my decision based on probability. What did you get the probability from? From statistics that I've gathered. Exactly right. I don't flip a coin. It's not 50-50 like that. I've collected data over the years. I've got data. Here it is. Boom. Okay, now I'm going to make a decision. Why do this one? Because probably, there you go, probably it's going to work out the best for us. Okay, so that's kind of where what I want to leave. I think that today. Yeah, I just leave it at that, I guess. Questions at all? Did you come up with anything else you want to see before we call it a day? Later today, as I say, the quiz will go up, and probably today or tomorrow, I will get the other video up with the other 2 algorithms. The quiz must be done today. No. You'll have until, I'd hope to have it up earlier in the week, and then I kind of spaced it off. Usually I try to make them due on Sunday night, 11:59, but it won't be this Sunday. I'll give you more time than that. No, I don't think I'm going to time it. The tests I will, but not the homework. No, not the quiz. Nice. Hey, Annie's here. All right. Well, I think that's all I got. I'll stay on long enough to say hi to Annie if she ever comes on. That's kind of funny. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. So homework 1 and 2, do this Sunday night. Yes. 11:59 p.m. Yep. Well, Annie, you're just in time for me to say goodbye. Do you have any questions? Well, I said normally I'm going to have the quizzes due on Sundays, but I'm later than I wanted to getting it up. So I'm going to push it back out. So it won't be due today ever. It'll usually be due on a Sunday night, but this week I'm going to give you a little more time. Does that make sense? It'll go up today, though. The quiz will go up today at some point. Okie dokie. Well, I think that's all I got. So I'll see you all around. Bye.